my name's Tim Kenny from Tim Kenny Surveying, and a little while ago I posted a picture of my camera pole on LinkedIn, and it got a few well, let's be honest, they're a slightly controversial bit of kit within the surveying world. There are some people who just will not use them at all. There are those that maybe will use them for a level 3 survey. There are those that maybe offer them as an add-on, an optional extra within the survey, and there are those like me that use them pretty much for everything. Anytime they'd be useful, I pull this out and I use it as I need to. So I thought I'd do a little video just kind of explaining, especially what I use, explaining why I use it, but also some of the kind of the perils, the risks, the things to think about when you do use them. Because as I say, they're not perfect. They do have their drawbacks, and you need to understand what they are. So to start, I thought I'll talk you through the kit that I use. I'll start by saying it's not an advert. I have no connection to any of the companies involved. These opinions are all my own. I will also say that I have not done a full review of all the products out on the market. I know there are lots of different options. You can go anything from a converted flagpole, which might cost you just a few tens of quid, all the way up to expensive bits of kit that have built-in cameras and swivel mounts and a little control unit attached to them that will cost you, £1,000 and up. So expensive bits of stuff. For me, I needed a kind of a mid-range option, so I went with this from Composite Poles. It's fairly sturdy, it's fairly easy to use, relatively light, and has done me good service over the last few years. It's an 8-metre pole because you have to kind of know what you're going to use it for to work out how big you need to use. So I generally do, most of my area, it's kind of not much more than 2-storey properties, and 8 metres kind of gives me a decent view of most 2-storey properties up onto the roof and into the chimney and everything I need to see. Generally I can get a view from 8 metres. If I was somewhere with a lot of 3-storey townhouses, maybe I'd have gone for 13 metres to give myself that extra reach, but wasn't necessary for me, so I was happy with this. In terms of cameras, I just use my standard, I think I've got a Panasonic Lumix. Couldn't tell you what model this is because I've used a few over the years and I kind of lost track of it. Fairly recent one, I think, but it's a fairly decent, sturdy, compact camera with a reasonable zoom, and does me good service. My preference has always been to use just the same camera, both on the camera pole and for the rest of my surveys. Mainly because I don't want to have to, remember to charge 2 cameras, remember to download the pictures from 2 cameras, make my life simple, use the same one. The good function this has built in is that it has Wi-Fi, so I can connect it directly to my phone. So all I need to do is attach my camera with a little screw mount on the top, much as you would do to any tripod, connect it through to my phone, and then I can use the camera exactly as I would do as if I had it in my hands. Zoom, take the photograph, change to video. I can also see and review those photographs immediately from my phone as well. It's fairly easy to use. It's a good function on that. I think it's something that's fairly standard now within most modern compact cameras. They all kind of do the same thing, so whichever one you want to do, that's not a bad idea. I know some people prefer to use a separate camera, something like a GoPro or whatever else. They obviously have their reason for it. I don't quite understand it, but you need to look at how you're going to use it, what your individual setup is. Perhaps if you use your phone or your tablet to take photographs, that's not going to work because you can't really attach it onto this. But have a look at it, think about what you need for yourself. The other thing to think about is how you're going to transport it. So as you can see, I'll stand up next to this one. I am 182 or 6 foot. This pole's about my height, so it can be a little bit awkward to transport. I drive a Mini Countryman, so it's a reasonable sized car, not massive, not small, but I find this fits easy into it. I do have to drop the middle seat at the back, slide it all the way through, but it rests on the armrest without getting in my way. Doesn't cause me a problem. It's completely safe and easy to transport. So that's kind of what I use, but it's worth investigating, worth looking into what will suit you, both in terms of budget and in terms of the property you use and how you're going to deal with things. Once obviously you've decided that you're going to get a camera pole, you need to think about how you use it. And with any bit of kit, the first thing we always have to think about is safety. It's great to provide a high level of service to our clients, make sure we're giving all the best information. But if doing that has a big risk of causing damage, or at worst case scenario puts ourselves at risk, then it's probably not going to be worth it. First thing we need to think about then when you're looking at the risk with a pole camera is the weather. Now today I was going to do this video outside actually, and I could show you kind of lifting the whole thing up, show you how it kind of works and how you kind of do this, and you can slide it up, and I could show you the whole thing. Unfortunately, it's tipping it down with rain, and it is incredibly windy out there at the moment. So if I were to try and use this outside, not only would I get wet and my camera would get ruined, but I'd be at a bit of a danger. You'd see it wobbling all over the place, and I'd probably end up hurting myself. And it's pretty much exactly the same on site. You know, if you turn up and the weather is horrible, there is no way you're going to be using your pole camera. And that's kind of an assessment you would make on site, much as you would assess the risk with anything you're doing. You look at what's happening, you look at what's in front of you, you make that assessment based on the possibility of harm and the extent of the harm that could be caused, and then you've got to make a judgment as to whether it's worth going ahead with. So for me, if it's as windy as it is now, then I certainly wouldn't be getting my pole camera out. The other thing to think about is that you are extending this into the air, so you have to look up and you have to see what's above you. Now firstly, you're not going to extend this all the way up inside a house, you're always going to be using it outside. So you're looking at things like power lines, phone lines, trees, TV aerial, satellite dishes, anything that could easily get damaged by the pole camera, could get tangled on the pole camera, could just knock into it. You know, once you do extend this, the top of it is going to move around quite a lot. They're not rigid, they do have some flexibility in it. So you will see your camera wobbling about at the top of it. So you need to make sure that if it does wobble, it's not going to bash into anything. Keeping everything safe, making sure you're not damaging yourself, your equipment, or the subject building that you're looking at. Other bit of advice that I always give is, if you're going to use a pole camera and you've done your assessment, you've done your risk assessment, you decide it's safe to put it up where you are, only put it up where you are. Don't think, okay, well, I'll put it all the way up. Oh, actually, I can't see around that little bit there. I know I'm going to move across. As soon as you do that, you're going to knock into something. It's going to be wobbling all over the place. Use it in a static way. If you need to look at it from a different angle, drop the pole, carry it across safely, and put it back up again. Common sense, but we all know that, you know, once you're at a property, you're really thinking about what you're doing, you're focused on what you're seeing in front of you. Sometimes you don't stop and think about these little things. So, you know, if you do need to write yourself ideally we always have a written risk assessment. You write that note within your site note saying, okay, I've looked at this, and this to make sure it's safe to do what I'm going to do. If you've done all that, then great, you can go ahead and do it. One other risk that really I think does get maybe overlooked a little bit, and that's the risk of invasion of privacy. You know, in the day we're going to be putting this up 8 meters up into the air. It's going to be, you know, twizzling around as we look at it. We're looking down at our camera, we're not really looking up here. It'd be very easy for you to point that in a window at kind of a slightly inappropriate time. So we need to be aware of that. And for me, that involves firstly telling any occupiers of the subject property that, you know, I'm going to be sticking this camera pole up. It might go up past their bedroom window or their bathroom window or whatever it is. You know, just make them aware so they're not surprised by it. But you've also got to think about the building around us. Fine if you're doing a big old detached place in the countryside and there's nobody for miles, fine, no one else to worry about. But working in town, working around other buildings, there is going to be houses next to you, and once you get past a certain point, you may well be, you know, coming into contact with the camera, sort of viewing into those windows. Personally, I always do my best to make sure I'm only taking pictures that don't involve other people's windows, keeping it not pointed at somebody else's windows. I did see once a Facebook post. Somebody said that they had in one of their kind of local network groups, someone was complaining about somebody putting up this pole camera and taking possibly up to dodgy things. It turned out it was just a surveyor doing his work. But people do kind of have concerns about these things. So I always try and make sure that I never point the camera anywhere other than the subject property. If it would be necessary to take a picture that might, you know, impinge on another property, I'll try and avoid that. If it's really worth it, if it's really necessary, I can't avoid going up past a window belonging to somebody else, then yeah, go and knock on the door. Go and tell them that this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it. It's going to be a lot less embarrassing to do that than it is to have to explain to somebody why you've just taken a picture of them in maybe a delicate moment. So it's kind of, you know, think about that privacy, think about those people around you, and make sure that, you know, yeah, it's physically safe, but you know, you're also safe from a privacy point of view. There's another risk that we need to factor in, we need to think about, and that is the risk to our liability, our professional indemnity insurance. One of the concerns that a lot of people do have is that as soon as you start using a pole camera, you're kind of seeing more of a building. If you see more, are you more at risk of being told, okay, well, you should have seen this defect or that defect, or you should have noticed this problem. Why didn't you notice this problem? You had a pole camera, you should have seen everything. Truth is, they're not perfect. You know, we are only ever going to be limited to what, you know, pokes up in the viewfinder of our camera. You know, most of them don't have a swivel mount that you can control, so, you know, again, angle's always going to be tricky. You can try and lean them slightly, and you can zoom, and you can do around, and you can do your best to get as much coverage as you can. But it's never ideal. It's never going to give you as good a view as if you were up on that roof yourself and really looking at it, which, you know, much of that would be great for everyone, all of us to do, not always a possibility. So for me, I always make it clear in my terms, and I do it again in the reports, that, you know, this is not a perfect solution. This is not the same as a roof level inspection. And I also tell clients that it's to be used at the surveyor's discretion only. You know, I'm not going to guarantee that I'm going to use it every time. Particularly as we talked about in terms of the weather, in terms of the risks, you know, there will be times when I cannot use this pole camera. Much as it would be great to do it, much as I might get some really good information from my client, I'm not going to be able to do it. So I can't promise them that it's going to happen. And it's for exactly that reason that I don't kind of use it as a selling point. You know, I think it might be great to say, oh, you know, I'm going to use my pole camera and that'll give you really great information and show you a lot more. As soon as you start to use it in your kind of your marketing material, you're setting a certain expectation for the client. So they're going to assume you're going to use it all the time. You know, and they're going to assume that they're going to get all the information about their roof. Which again, as we established, is not the case. There are limits to it, and we need to understand and we need to be clear with the client about those limits. So yeah, I'll mention it in my terms and conditions. I'll mention it in the reports that it is limited. There are times when I'll discuss it with a client because they've got a particular interest or there's something they've particularly flagged up as needing to understand. So I might have a conversation with them about using the pole camera. And I'll say, yeah, no, I can probably get at that, or I'll try to get at this with the pole camera, but it does have this limitation, or there might be times when I can't use it. And I'll make sure that conversation is properly documented. You know, if it's on the phone, I might follow it up with a site note. I'll probably follow up with an email. So they've got clearly in writing that, yeah, I'll try and use the pole camera. It would be great to get the information, but there will be limits to it, and it may not be possible for me to do that. And again, that's kind of, it's similar where people say, okay, well, I'll do it as an optional extra. You know, you give me an extra 50, 100 quid or whatever it is you want to charge on top of the survey. My problem with that has always been, well, okay, well, again, you know, I've invoiced for the extra £100. I always take payment before production of the report. But what if I get there and I find that, again, I can't do it? I've invoiced my client that extra 100 quid, but actually when I get there, the weather's too bad, or there's a problem on the site that means I can't use it. Do I refund it to them and say, actually, I couldn't use that, in which case there's got a slight element of disappointment? Or do I then have to try and reschedule another visit? And we all know how difficult it can be to reschedule return visits that we're not expecting to have to make. So that's why for me, I'll mention it when I need to, but I don't really use it as a selling point. Yeah, I sell what I do as a high quality survey, and I do that in lots of different ways, but I've not really found a benefit to selling it as, okay, well, I do this, and this, and be very specific about it. No, talk about the quality that you as the individual surveyor offer and how you work with the person and everything else. Don't get this kind of set this expectation of every time based on stuff that is ultimately going to be fallible. So yeah, that's kind of my brief overview on what you can do with a pole camera, why they're great, you know, but they are also limited. So yeah, thank you very much.